Hi, everybody. I'm Will Hutchins, and I sure hope you'll be watching me every other week, alternating with that big fella, Cheyenne, in our exciting hour-long western, Sugarfoot. We've got a good show for you. There's more action going on in Sugarfoot than you ever saw. The shooting's good and true, and the riding's fast and furious. Of course, I make pretty sure that wherever I am, there's some pretty gals around. There's all of this and more every other week on Sugarfoot. Hope you like it. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure you will.
Sugarfoot, every other week on ABC.
Well, whenever we have our next guest on the program, it's always guaranteed to be a good time. He's an actor and a journalist. I'll call him a journalist because of his column on westernclippings.com. It's old Sugarfoot himself, Will Hutchins. Will, welcome back to the show.
Howdy. It's great to be here. I never got any compliments out in L.A., but I love to be on your show because you call me an actor? Wow, I never got accused of that before. Journalist, I got my lowest grade in college in creative writing, so woo, thank you.
Now, the last time we spoke, you referred to yourself, I think, as the king of the unsold pilots.
Exactly. It was kind of a hoodoo. I'm surprised anybody hired me. I was like a jinx. I didn't think about it at the time, but in retrospect, yes.
Well, this particular pilot that you sent me and I got a chance to watch, I read up on it. It's from 1962. And it's a show called Howie, based on a play, right?
Right. Albert Selmy played Howie. As I understand, the play was one of those isolation booths, like $64,000 question.
Right.
And he was a genius of sorts, and he knew all the questions. And I don't know much more than that, except I'm that guy out of the booth. They let me out of the booth, and I went wild.
But 1962, Paul Lynde.
Right.
Is the star of the show.
Yeah.
And you play, and I've noticed this a lot in your career, that you played kind of youthful, excitable, naive characters.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I just done Sugarfoot up to 1961, and then they cast me aside like a squeezed lemon, and this is my first chance, and I thought, wow, they should show them. I'm going right into a series. I know it'll be a big hit. It's a great script. The only thing is, I was used to doing things kind of quietly, because the mic's right in over your head.
Right.
And Sugarfoot wasn't a loudmouth, except once in a while he ranted and raved in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So Bill Asher was the director, and he was married to Elizabeth Montgomery at the time.
Right.
And he had directed Lucille Ball shows, I think, I Love Lucy. So he kept trying to get me to be broader and broader, and I felt really phony about it. I didn't think that was the way to do it. I thought, the script tells you, it gives you the idea, and no, more and more. And it's funny, a teacher I had at when I was at Pomona College, I'd go next door to Scripps College for Women and take a course in the history of the theater. And I love going up to Scripps. There's some great co-eds up there. And I did plays up there, too. And it's Lindsay Workman was his name. Mm-hmm. And he was in the show, and he played one of the bridge players.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so all during the rehearsal, the director kept yelling at me more and more. And I looked over at Lindsay, and he kind of went, he knew what I was talking about.
Right.
Boy, Bill Asher is the guy that knew what he was talking about. Boy, he was right on the beam there.
A toast to the bride and groom. Wherever you may be, whatever remote corners of the world you may find yourselves in, may happiness and joy be with you always.
Thanks, Dad. Traldika Marov Salantikan.
What's that?
It's an old Yukardi tribal toast. May there always be many fingers in your pot. I guess it doesn't translate too well.
Howie speaks 12 languages.
Oh, my Yukardi's kind of rusty.
Well, I don't imagine too many people on Long Island will notice.
As I was watching it, I thought to myself, there's a little bit of this, and this is 1962, but there's a little bit that reminds me of what All in the Family would become, because Paul Lynde's character's wife is named Edith in the show, and they had the son-in-law that the father-in-law didn't like. And I found out that later on this concept was revived 10 years later and became the Paul Lynde Show.
Exactly.
Right.
I was at a party one night, and Paul Lynde was there sitting at a table all by himself like the Buddha, a boozed-up Buddha. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, Will, I wish you were still Howie." And I said, "Impossible, Paul. I'm 10 years older. You haven't changed a bit. I couldn't be your son-in-law anymore. You could be my son-in-law." And he said, "Well, would you kiss me goodnight?" And I said, "Sure." So I kissed him on the cheek, honest. And it was just like kissing my dad. He needed a shave, too. But then I'd see him from time. In fact, he did a Hey Landlord. He was in a Hey Landlord.
Oh, okay.
And he looked as if he took pity on me. It wasn't the greatest. I wasn't the greatest. It was not that great a script, but it was great working with him again. And then we did game shows. I was on Hollywood Squares a couple of times.
It's funny because when the Paul Lynde Show came along in 1972 or whenever it was, it was criticized for being too close to All in the Family, and yet I'm watching this and it's from 1962, and it was all there.
Well, Marlon Brando once said, "In this business, you have to steal. Make sure you steal from the very best."
Right. But it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of good jokes in there. And what Paul Lynde does, he sells everything with facial expressions.
And he was very emphatic about that. My favorite line of his was, I tell him, "But what about Massachusetts?" And he says, "I don't give a hang about Massachusetts." One of the great line readings of all time.
Right. Well, did you have a nice conference, Dad?
Fine, Howie, fine. Mary, when Mr. Hennessy arrives...
Oh, Dad!
When Mr. Hennessy arrives, send him right in. He what? Well, he couldn't have. He hasn't signed the releases.
Well, Mr. Hennessy...
Howie, I'm talking. Well, send someone out to find him quickly.
Dad, if you're looking for Mr. Hennessy, he just went back to his newspaper stand.
You talk to him.
Oh, yes. He wanted to sign those releases, but I knew you wouldn't want him to, so I told him about Massachusetts versus Smith, and he decided to keep his stand.
You talked him out of signing the releases.
Don't thank me. You were in a board meeting, and I wanted to be helpful.
Oh, you have been, Howie. I'll tell you what you've just done. In less than 5 minutes, all by yourself, you've ruined a case I've been working on for a year. And you've cost me my biggest client.
Well, how could I? Massachusetts versus...
I don't care a hang about Massachusetts. I don't care about your getting out of here.
But...
Out!
There's a moment in there where I guess your character had brought this tiki god, the god of fertility, and the daughter reaches over to touch it, and Paul Lynde goes, "Don't touch it."
Yeah. And he just threw that away. He didn't make a big thing out of that. I noticed on most sitcoms, they have that rhythm. They set it up, and then, bam, sack it right between the eyes. Well, after a while, they're all kind of alike.
Yeah.
You know what I loved about that show? The mother-in-law, Peggy...
Peggy Knudsen.
Right. She was in The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, and I just thought she was so gorgeous.
Oh, you know what? I have to tell you, I had the same reaction watching that last night.
That's one of the main reasons I was sorry it didn't sell.
Now, was that shot in front of a studio audience?
Right, it was.
Oh, yeah.
And, I had an audition for it, And Buck Henry was up for the part, too. And he was great when he did his audition. I forget how it worked, but he did it great. And I really complimented him, and he just kind of, he didn't really say much. I would have liked to jawed with him a little bit. Anyhow, the guy that got the part, actually, was Tony Roberts of Woody Allen movies fame and all.
Right.
And so forth. Did a lot of Broadway. He got the part, and he was a lot younger than I said, well, I can understand that, because I was in my 30s, and he was probably breaking into his 20s, if that. So he got to do all the rehearsing, and they decided at the last minute that he wasn't going to do it. So there I am, 20 takes Hutchins. I got about 2 days to get up in the part. So don't tell me there wasn't Panicsville. And the producer of the show, Chris Law or something Productions, it was Peter Lawford was the producer. And so that was a big kick, getting to work for him, Peter Lawford, geez. I've seen him in a lot of movies and all the, the Sinatra and all those guys. So a few years later, I get married, my first wife, and we get married in the Plaza Hotel. And after the wedding ceremony, we're all just milling around, killing time until my wife tells me it's time to go. And there's Peter Lawford. I'm glad to see him shaking his hand. What the heck was he doing at my wedding? I never did find that one out. I would like to know the mystery there.
Well, he was so appreciative of you being in that show.
He didn't want to let go. Oh, and another thing about Howie, as much as I liked it, they really wanted to sell it, and it was a CBS show, but they couldn't find that guy Jim Aubrey couldn't find a spot for it, I guess. So they were going to sell it to ABC. That was the big hustle.
Oh.
And I was asked by Monty Pittman, who's the greatest guy I ever worked with. He wrote and directed and acted in shows at Warner Brothers when I was there, and they were the best sugar feet I ever did. And he was the best director and just the greatest guy. And unfortunately, he smoked a lot of cigars. He always had a cigar. So he called me up, and he sounded just like Babe Ruth. Hey, Will. It sounds like me, too. Hey, Will, how would you like to do a pilot for me and play a small-town doctor? And if I had my life to live over again, they could have sued me. But I would have done that thing for him, because he didn't live that much longer afterwards.
Yeah.
That was his last project, Montgomery Pittman. And he was Sherry Jackson's stepdad.
Oh, okay, sure.
And I used to have dreams that I did a Sugarfoot with Sherry Jackson, but she never did one of ours. But we did work together on a 77 Sunset Strip. We're a tagline, kind of a punchline toward the end with Cookie. Because Sugarfoot had kind of messy hair,
Yeah, right.
And the joke was, hey, Cookie, lend him your comb.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of scene that I dig. Baby, you're the ginchiest.
From 1959, that's Ed Cookie Burns and Connie Stevens with Cookie, Lend Me Your Comb. Our guest today is actor Will Hutchins. And Will, this is the third conversation we've had on the air, and I've asked you about a bunch of your television work, but I've yet to ask about a series you starred in that's fondly remembered by a lot of people, and that's Blondie.
Oh.
Now, you took over the role of Dagwood Bumstead for Arthur Lake, because he was the guy.
He did it in the movie. Of course, that was a big, successful movie series.
Yeah, him and Penny
Columbia.
Singleton, yeah.
I grew up on it. Yeah, I played Dagwood, and Dagwood lost. But I really enjoyed playing the part, and it only ran half a season. And I love working on it. Pat Hardy kind of was disappointed because she was promised that Blondie would be sort of like Lucille Ball. She'd get to do all these crazy things. But Dagwood was the nut, and she was the old-fashioned stay-at-home. Now she's got her own business, and I never fail to read it in the papers every day. She's got her own business now, catering business. But she was kind of stuck at home, and I got to do all the goofy stuff. And Jim Backus was Mr. Dithers, and we did a lot of crazy stuff together. And he was even funnier in real life. He was funny, in the stuff they gave him. But in real life, he was really, really a funny guy. And so I really enjoyed working with him. And we got canceled, I think it was in November. And he said, well, that's all right. I said, yeah? He said, yeah, now we won't have to buy the crew Christmas presents. So there's always a bright side to everything. Right. But I think I was a better Dagwood than I was a Woody Banner on Hey Landlord. I think it was, and my ex-wife said, you're a natural Dagwood. And I went, thank you. And then I went,
Yeah, exactly.
But I loved it doing that, and I got to do a lot of physical comedy in it. And I think I might have told you this. There was one scene where I'm supposed to fall down the stairs, and the director, Gene Nelson, said, you can just kind of scoot down, and then we'll speed it up with the camera. And I didn't think that was so good. And here comes Billy Curtis, who was one of the Munchkins years before. And he says, you want to know how Laurel and Hardy would do that? I said, anything. He's not supposed to do this, but just over in the shadows. He says, trust me, just go down like on a slide. Just hold yourself taut. It won't hurt a bit. And I did it. It worked great. I only got to see it once, so they never reran the show.
I always tell people the best thing you could ever do is sit down and watch those Laurel and Hardy shorts for Hal Roach.
Oh.
They're just...
Hal Roach, to me, is right up there with Disney.
Oh.
All the stuff he created. Oh.
And the music in the background.
Oh, yeah. All that kind of...
Yep.
My grandmother took me to my first movies, matinees. She picked me up after kindergarten, take me, and I remember it was on Wilshire Boulevard, and it was Babes in Toyland.
Oh, yeah.
And here are these two guys. I thought everybody was actually there behind the screen. I didn't know what movies were. And here are these two goofy guys asleep and snoring and blowing a feather back and forth at each other. And I thought, gee, how could they do that every day like that and get it right? Gee, that was amazing.
I've often said, everybody loves Stan Laurel, and of course he came up with most of the gags.
Yeah.
But to me, I think the best comic actor I've ever seen on the screen is Oliver Hardy.
Oh, but you sure picked a great one.
Oh, all he has to do is just look at the camera.
Yeah.
and I lose it.
And you know what he's thinking at all times.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's another fine mess you've gotten us into. One night I spent an evening with Stan Laurel. One of the guys I worked with in Hey Landlord, Kip King. He's the father of Catan, Chris Catan.
Oh, yeah, that actor, sure.
Yeah. So anyhow, he was always getting me involved in things, and he says Stan Laurel's name is in the phone book. And so he called him up once and asked if he could come over. He said, certainly, come right over. And so I had a date, and the three of us went over there. He had an apartment in Santa Monica, and he had a nice Russian wife. I think he met her at the Russian tea room in the Valley. And he could have been a nicer guy, and he was laughing all the time. He didn't laugh that much as Stan, because he was always so bewildered. But he was laughing, and he said the thing that interested him, a guy like Jerry Lewis, you go to a Jerry Lewis movie and says, starring Jerry Lewis, directed by Jerry Lewis, written by Jerry Lewis, men's orderly Jerry Lewis in the men's room. He says, we all did our own movies. No one else knew how to make our movies, but we didn't have to take all the credit for it. You just went without saying.
Yeah, it's true.
That was all those were in his mind. All those great stories.
And I'd heard that even after Oliver Hardy died, he still worked on ideas for the team. He just couldn't stop. It was just what he did.
Oh, that's a great story. You heard of Sam Levine?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, he was the guy in Guys and Dolls, Nathan Detroit.
Yeah.
Well, I got to work with a great actor, Italian actor, Vince Gardenia. Geez, Babs knows more than I do. Vince Gardenia in a play, and he says he was doing a play with Sam Levine once, and finally the play ended, and they all parted ways, and he drove back to New York with Sam Levine. And it was silence, and then Sam says, Vince, that scene at the top of the stairs, will you point to the lady and say that line? He says, yeah. He says, well, don't you think it'd be a little better if you could just turn a little farther and gesture with your other hand? He was still going over the play in his mind.
Right. One of the things you sent me, in addition to the pilot for the TV series Howie, which we were talking about earlier, was a CD containing an episode of a radio show you did. Tell us about that.
I did that for 12 years, internet, Hutchins Golden Melody Saloon for Boston Pete. And he finally disbanded the thing, and now the last I heard he was selling real estate, which is very common in show business. You end up selling real estate. Anyhow, I loved doing that show because I used Cloudy and Cool as my theme song, and I was the bartender.
Right.
And then I had my sidekick, Smitty. Yeah. That was my sidekick. And then I had Fancy, the bar girl, barmaid. Oh, sorry, barmaid. And then Chicago Molly was the waitress. And I played all four parts. Right. And then I did Assorted Drunks, guys lying on the floor of my saloon. Hey, wait, bartender, give me a whiskey. There you are, sir. Hey, bartender, another whiskey. Sir, wouldn't you like to sit at the bar? No, I prefer standing. And stuff like that. Well, after a while, Pete thought that was getting a little too raucous, for family audiences. So I had to make it. It became a Hutchins Golden Melody Stream or something, and I just introduced the songs. But I tried to get as many yucks in there as I could, anyhow.
Howdy hi, howdy ho, ladies and gents. Will Hutchins here with Love and Good Cheer. It's time for my Golden Melody Show. Yeah, golden, as in royalties for the songsmiths responsible for today's musical menu. But without further hello, I dedicate this first ditty to Boston Pete's newest DJ, Dina.
Dina.
That, of course, folks, was Danny Kaye, gittling his way into our hearts with Dina. In fact, he and his wife Sylvia named their daughter Dina. I used to haunt Danny Kaye's radio show when I was a kid.
On the episode you sent me, you talk about, as a boy, going to see Danny Kaye do his radio show. Who else did you see?
I used to go see Corliss Archer. In fact, she came to our junior high school once and talked to us. That was a big thrill for me.
I can imagine. Yeah, people forget radio, when that first came along, that had the same kind of impact that the Internet did on culture.
Oh, I bet. When we were kids, we didn't have much. It was a depression. We had the radio, though, and we had nuclear families. And once a week, 50 million people listened to Bing Crosby, and there were only 130 million people in the United States then.
Yeah.
And so I told this to Phil Schaap, who's a disc jockey. He does jazz on the radio here. I told that to him, and he didn't believe me. But it's true. And I got to work with all these great radio actors from the past at Newark and Brockton, Massachusetts, and up in northern New York and Cincinnati. We do these radio conventions, and they're kind of dying out now because the audiences are kind of withering away, and so are the performers. Knock wood.
Well, I don't like to call it old-time radio myself. I call it timeless radio.
Well, if you hear it right now, it's not old-time, and I've got tons of tapes and CDs and things. Yeah, I just loved radio. The theater of the mind. My mom made me go to bed at 8 p.m., but she didn't make me turn off the radio. And so I lay there in the dark, not too dark, though. I had to have the whole light on because Orson Welles really scared me. Right. And then I'd always fall asleep, and she'd always have to get up out of bed and come in and turn off the radio. But she didn't hit me. Once in a while, she'd have to discipline me, and she used a hairbrush, and I much preferred that to lectures.
Right. Yeah. At least it was quick.
Yeah. Oh, I want to get a little plug in here.
Oh, sure.
July 27th at 8 p.m. on TCM, they're showing The Shooting. It's part of the month on TCM called Shane plus 100 more great Westerns. Isn't that great?
Oh, yeah, that is great.
It's over 100 Westerns, and one of them is The Shooting, 8 p.m. TCM, July 27th. I got top billing when the movie came out, but I know as a TV guy, there are only 4 people in the movie. But they mention Lily Perkins, Jack Nicholson, and Warren Oates. And I look way at the bottom of the page, but I'm not on there. But if you watch it, you'll see that I'm on the screen first.
Yeah. So Wednesday, July 27th, 8 p.m. on Turner Classic Movies, 1967's The Shooting, starring, and let's be clear about that, starring our guest today, Will Hutchins. And, of course, make sure to visit westernclippings.com to read Will's column on there, fine column about all sorts of things.
I just want to ask one question.
Sure, go right ahead.
And you've probably been asked this 1,000 times, but I want to ask it to you once. Where did you get the name Ghosty?
Well, I'll tell you. Right before I went on the air, the very first time I was doing radio, they said you have to pick a pseudonym because you never know when someone's going to go crazy and show up at your house.
Yeah.
So, and I said, okay, well, I'll pick something. And I thought, well, what am I? I'm a voice that's traveling. You know, I'm showing up in people's on their radios, and it's almost a ghostly presence.
Wow.
And I went with ghosty instead of ghostly because I said, well, that's an adjective. I'll go with ghosty. And then I looked it up afterwards, and ghosty is also an adjective. So I picked an adjective. I should have picked a noun. That would have made more sense, you know. But it stuck.
My cowboy name could have been Bumbling.
And you know what interests me? I'm starting to become fascinated with the movie knowledge of Babs.
Oh, yeah.
Walking, it's like that game Trivial Pursuit.
Oh, yeah. But, you know, I understand that Sugarfoot was a question in the original game.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I'm sure she could answer it.
She knows that one. But you ought to interview her next time a little bit. I keep trying to come over here and sing the Sugarfoot song with me, but she won't do it. Now, she's not shy when it comes to the internet, but when it comes to showing off on the phone, I can't get her over here.
So next time we speak, Babs is going to do a big song and dance.
Oh, great. And she's a great dancer, too. I'll describe it.
All right, well, you take care.
Okay, Ghosty, thanks a lot.
Oh.
It's a great honor to be connected with you on this phone line here for your show.
The honor's all mine. You take care, and we'll speak to you again.
Okay, adios, amigo.
All right, and best to Babs.
And adios, audience. Ha-ha!
There he goes.